Near a town by the name of Libadea, you stand before a cave. A gentle haze beclouds your thoughts, affecting your memory. The images of the past faintly recoil from view. The future is still wrapped in dense black yarn, and the present so incredibly uncertain. After customary purifications and ablutions, under the watchful eye of the nymph Herkina, you hear the babbling of her river near where you stand. At long last you've arrived at the dwelling place of the god. Naked, but for a piece of white linen, you stand humble and vulnerable before the entranceway. For in the presence of the gods are we not all naked and humbled, aware of our mortal frame, the corruptibility of flesh, the ephemerality of life? Though purified for a moment, you are still aware of your existential pollution, for man's memory is short-lived and faded. The mind cannot slake its thirst and retain the waters of knowledge that endlessly flow from the divine. But you drank from the two sacred fountains to help clear your mind and strengthen your memory. You sacrificed the ram and grasped the honey cakes to appease the serpents and spirits that guard this sacred place. You can only faintly remember the instruction that you must descend, for you stand before the Cave of Trophonius. Down you go, feet first, into the enfolding arms of blackness and night. Plutarch writes of the Cave of Trophonius in his work entitled the Genio Socratis. One of the interlocutors, Simmias, hesitates before recounting the story of Timarchus of Charanea's descent, saying, "The story I had about it from Timarchus of Chaironea, as it more resembles a myth or fiction than argument, I had perhaps better leave untold." Theocritus responds to Simmias, saying, "Do no such thing, but let us have it, for myths too, despite the loose manner in which they do so, have a way of reaching the truth." Timarchus descended to learn the nature of Socrates' enigmatic and mysterious sign. In Plato's Apology, Socrates says, "I have a divine sign, daimonion, from the god, which began when I was a child. It is a voice, and whenever it speaks it turns me away from something I am about to do, but it never turns me towards anything." Plutarch says, quote, "Timarchus, then, in his desire to learn the nature of Socrates' sign, acted like the high-spirited young initiate in philosophy he was. Consulting no one but Cebes and me, he descended into the crypt of Trophonius, first performing the rites that are customary at the oracle. He remained underground 2 nights and a day, and most people had already given up hope, and his family were lamenting him for dead, when he came up in the morning with a radiant countenance. He did obeisance to the god, and as soon as he had escaped the crowd, began to tell us of many wonders seen and heard." He said that on descending into the oracular crypt, his first experience was of profound darkness. Next, after a prayer, he lay a long time not clearly aware whether he was awake or dreaming. It did seem to him, however, that at the same moment he heard a crash and was struck on the head, and that the sutures parted and released his soul. As it withdrew and mingled joyfully with air that was translucent and pure, it felt in the first place that now, after long being cramped, it had again found relief, and it was growing larger than before, spreading out like a sail. And next, that it faintly caught the whir of something revolving overhead with a pleasant sound. The word used to describe the crash is psophos, and it is followed by a pleasant sound, something that is reminiscent of a whirring, buzzing, revolving, or a humming. The word here is described as a roisos. In many people who have encountered near-death experiences or shifts in conscious states, these noises signal a transition. Furthermore, like the emergence of Athena from the head of Zeus, the psyche is the seed or the sperma that is stored in the head. Therefore, the head itself is the beginning or source of generation. For this reason, the visions encountered by Timarchus depict both the composition and creation of the universe, along with the nature of the daemons that facilitate the soul's journey through the cycles of reincarnation. Quote, "All this he viewed with enjoyment of the spectacle, but looking down he saw a great abyss, round, as though a sphere had been cut away. Most terrible and deep it was, and filled with a mass of darkness that did not remain at rest, but was agitated and often welled up. From it could be heard innumerable roars and groans of animals, the wailing of innumerable babes, the mingled lamentations of men and women, and noise and uproar of every kind, coming faintly from far down in the depths, all of which startled him not a little." Timarchus is speaking to a disembodied voice in the cave, or was it through a dream, or perhaps in a state that is both waking and asleep? There is no evidence that the Cave of Trophonius was an incubation shrine, so we must wonder at this auditory and visual phenomenon. Plutarch tells us that Timarchus himself did not know. "Polun chronon umala, sum phronun enargos sait egregore nait aineropole." For a long time, not at all clearly knowing whether he was awake or dreaming. In another passage, Plutarch continues, quote, "But whereas some men actually have this sort of apprehension in dreams, hearing better asleep, when the body is quiet and undisturbed, while when they are awake their soul can hear the higher powers but faintly, and moreover as they are overwhelmed by the tumult of their passions and the distractions of their wants, they cannot listen or attend to the message. Socrates, on the other hand, had an understanding which, being pure and free from passion, and commingling with the body but little, for necessary ends, was so sensitive and delicate as to respond at once to what reached him. What reached him, one would conjecture, was not spoken language, but the unuttered words of a daemon, making voiceless contact with his intelligence by their sense alone. For speech is like a blow. When we converse with one another, the words are forced through our ears, and the soul is compelled to take them in. Whereas the intelligence of the higher power guides the gifted soul, which requires no blows, but the touch of its thought. And the soul, on its part, yields to the slackening and tightening of its movements by the higher intelligence. No constraint is exerted, as no passion pulls the other way, and the movements of the soul respond easily and gently, like reins that give. Timarchus hears and sees the river Styx, the path to Hades, the four principles of all things, the islands of the gods, the terrestrial daemons of the moon. And in a moment of dark obscurity, Timarchus loses the clear vision, and the voice continues. Quote, "Thus, Timarchus," the voice pursued, "in the stars that are apparently extinguished, you must understand that you see the souls that sink entirely into the body. In the stars that are lighted again, as it were, and reappear from below, you must understand that you see the souls that flow back from the body after death, shaking off a sort of dimness and darkness as one might shake off mud, while the stars that move about on high are the daemons of men said to, quote, possess understanding. This possession of understanding comes at a great cost, however. Nothing is given by the gods without a price to be paid. Even the gift of our life comes at the cost of death. Near the end of this revelation, the voice tells Timarchus about the pre-Socratic philosopher who was able to use his psyche to travel far distances. Quote, "Among such souls you have doubtless heard of the Hermodoros of Clazomene, how night and day it used to leave his body entirely and travel far and wide, returning after it had met with and witnessed many things said and done in remote places, until his wife betrayed him and his enemies found his body at home untenanted by his soul and burnt it. The story as thus told is indeed not true. His soul did not leave his body, but gave its daemon free play by always yielding to it and slackening the tie, permitting it to move about and roam at will, so that the daemon could see and hear much that passed in the world outside and return with the report. The men who destroyed his body as he slept are still atoning for the deed in Tartarus. Of these matters, the voice said, you'll have better knowledge, young man, in the 3rd month from now. For the present, depart. As foretold, Timarchus died in the 3rd month after returning to Athens. However, not everyone who descended to the cave died, but in many ways they were altered in the same way. An example can be found in the writings of Semos of Delos, who wrote of a citizen named Parmeniskos of Metapontum, who after having returned lost his ability to laugh. Such anecdotes were so frequent that there developed a common expression describing someone who always retained a sense of seriousness as one, quote, who has consulted a Trophonius. Ais Trophoniu memantetai. This is undoubtedly the unnerving and at times terrifying experience of encountering the numinous, helpfully coined by Rudolf Otto as the Mysterium Tremendum et Fascinans. Upon returning to the surface of the earth, the residing priests sit you on the throne of Mnemosyne, the throne of memory, and eagerly await your recollection of what transpired. According to Pausanias, the priests asked the person, quote, what he had seen and learned. Oposa aide de kai eputeto. And the person was expected to record, quote, everything that each inquirer had heard or seen, onto a pinax, probably made of wood. Hence we have no evidence of what was experienced by the inquirers. But let us ask ourselves, why must we descend? Why risk the journey and endure the perils of the underworld, the fear and the horror? This is not idle curiosity that must be satisfied. This is something deeper and longer lasting. This is necessary for the continuity of the threads of the cosmos, to perfect and complete the work of cosmogenesis. This is to remember through repetition, to save memory on the seat of her throne, because we risk the destruction of all memory, the piece by piece dissembling of her throne, until at last we have forgotten that there was even anything to forget. Memory establishes history, not a universal history that seeks to carve out and exclude facts that are inconvenient and do not fit into a preconceived totalizing scheme, but by countless histories, each interacting with the other. Memory is an activity that recalls something vague, an image perhaps, but one that is never fully definite, with its contours blurred, and so every time memory recalls the past, it does so in a renewed fashion, one recollection similar but not identical to the next. And the interaction between the same and the different is one that is common to all living beings with souls. For this reason, memory is alive, and history is forever growing, forming, morphing, and imbued with a vitality that memory instills in it. It is an entity, and memory itself is a living knowing, and when you begin to forget, you begin to die. Like those who lose their memories, it is a gradual imbibing of the waters of Lethe. Do not die, friend. Do not allow for the obliteration of all memory. Sit on this throne of Mnemosyne, and sing your song of recollection to the attentive priests. I sing of white sails on turbulent seas, the light's envy of the shadow, the green blue of a beryl stone on the ring of a courtesan's finger, the howling of the Furies in the directionless depths of Tartarus, the claws of pollution snatching Phineus' food, Tiresias' eyeless orbits lined with woman's cold, weavers and spinners in baskets of thread in Gordian knots, Zeus's saffron-scented breath upon the dance of the crocuses, a shirt of poison in the arrows of envy when the hair has been shorn, Medea's madness as tears of sap ooze from pinewood, the forgotten deities of the nomadic desert tribes and lush forests of Britannia, jilted jinns and fairies, monomaniacal cyclopes with monocles of tunnel vision, ideas and ideologies, an unmoved mover that moves to this song, Corinthian columns of marble trees that contain the dreams of Anaximander's cosmos, the bodies subtle and not so subtle, the gyration of Aphrodite's girdle, the unknown goddess, Parmenides' chariot, the yogi yoked to the wheels of the sun to pierce the domain of the Adityas, Porphyrian robes of royalty and wealth, Agamemnon's pride crushed in mollusks. Bleed purple for your ambitions, you wanton destroyer of life. Tears of amber, shed by Phaethon's poplar sisters, as decomposition sets in. Ancestors of ash trees, Meliae, alchemically born from Gaia's womb and Uranus's blood. Orpheus, sing with your head, the seat of the soul. The lyre does not lie when you pluck. The memory's muses weave this song for me. The Promethean hero, deceiver, bringer of light, the complete blinding that leaves no insight. Rodin's graceful contours carved in Rilke's verse, the muteness of stone and garrulity of the hearse, the suspension of disbelief in a suspended kiss, the longing to recapture such moments as this, the sense that is senseless, defying human logic, the romantic audacity to pursue our earthly project, the labored panting of Stravinsky's chosen one in spring, the sapphire brilliance tucked beneath a nestling bird's wing, the sailing of wine-dark seas toward isles of the dead, the breaking of the body in its transfiguration to bread, the wispy clouds of chantilly cream that hover on a spoon, the silver-lined bowl in the fullness of the moon, the cracks in the vase and the fading of a print, the crimson-red sunset and gold leaf of Klimt, the space between two notes, pregnant with inarticulate sighs, the incessant chatter of beastly courting overgrown with lies, the exhausting dreams of Morpheus that bind us in sleep, the divine recumbent dreamer whose images we seek, the fullness of the moment and simultaneity of cause, the blank white verse of Lord Chandos on a piece of gauze, the primordial howl echoed in a lover's moan, the sound of silence when you are alone with the alone. Pausanias has said that, quote, those who have made the descent into the Cave of Trophonius must write what they have seen or heard on a tablet and set it up as a dedication. Therefore, I dedicate this verbal testimony to the god Trophonius. Take care for now.